Sometimes the person you'd take a bullet for ends up being the one holding the gun. I learned this the hard way when my wife of 3 years asked me to sign divorce papers so she could marry the 24-year-old intern she'd been sleeping with behind my back. What she didn't expect was for me to walk down the aisle the very next weekend with her biggest rival, her own sister. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is David Chen, and 3 months ago I thought I had everything figured out. I was 31, running the marketing department at a mid-sized consulting firm in Portland, married to Emma Rodriguez, and living what I believed was a stable, if predictable, life. Emma worked at Northwest Financial Group as a senior analyst, and we'd settled into one of those comfortable routines that married couples fall into. Dinner at 7, Netflix on weeknights, brunch with friends on Sundays. The first crack in our perfect facade appeared on a rainy Tuesday evening in March. I'd come home early with Thai takeout, planning to surprise Emma after her long day crunching numbers for quarterly reports. The house felt unusually quiet when I walked through the front door, calling out her name with no response. I assumed she was still at work, but then I heard her voice drifting down from our bedroom upstairs. She was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months, light, flirtatious, completely different from the tired sighs and half-hearted responses she'd been giving me lately. I climbed the stairs quietly, not wanting to startle her if she was on a work call. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, I could see Emma sitting on our bed, phone pressed to her ear, wearing the red silk dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. She never wore it anymore, claiming it was too fancy for every day. Yet here she was, dolled up on a Tuesday evening, speaking in hushed, intimate tones to whoever was on the other end of that call. "I miss you too," she whispered, twirling a strand of hair around her finger like a teenager with her first crush. "David's working late again tonight, so we could grab dinner if you want. That little place downtown you mentioned sounds perfect." My stomach dropped. David was working late, except David was standing right outside the bedroom door, listening to his wife make secret dinner plans with someone else. I backed away slowly, my mind racing through explanations that might make this innocent. Maybe it was a girlfriend. Maybe it was a work colleague discussing a project over dinner. Maybe I was overreacting to what could be a perfectly normal conversation, but deep down, I knew. The way she'd said my name, dismissive, like I was an obstacle to work around rather than a husband to consider. The secrecy, the special outfit, the tone in her voice that had become foreign to me in our own home. I'd heard Emma use that voice before, back when we were dating. Back when I was the recipient of those soft laughs and whispered conversations. I retreated downstairs and sat at our kitchen table, staring at the Thai food growing cold in its containers. When Emma finally came down 20 minutes later, she'd changed into sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. The transformation was jarring from the woman I'd glimpsed upstairs to the version of my wife I'd grown accustomed to seeing. "Oh, you're home early," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I didn't hear you come in. Just got here," I lied, gesturing to the food. "Thought we could have dinner together?" Emma glanced at her phone, and I caught the flash of disappointment that crossed her face. "Sweet, but I'm not really hungry. Had a big lunch with the team today." Rain check. She kissed my forehead quickly, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. "I need to run some errands before the stores close. Don't wait up if I'm late." I watched through our living room window as she got into her car and drove away, noting that she'd changed back into the red dress. The errands, apparently, required special attire. That night marked the beginning of what I now recognize as the longest 3 months of my life. Emma's behavior became increasingly erratic and distant. She started working late more frequently, taking phone calls in other rooms, and showing less interest in our conversations about work, future plans, or anything substantial. Our physical relationship dwindled to nothing, with Emma always too tired, too stressed, or too busy to be intimate. When I tried to bring up my concerns, she'd deflect with accusations about me being paranoid or needy. The second major red flag came during our monthly dinner with Emma's family. Her parents, Carlos and Maria Rodriguez, had invited us to their house in the Pearl District for Maria's famous homemade enchiladas. Emma's older sister Sophia was also there, having flown in from San Francisco where she'd been closing a major acquisition for her tech company, Rodriguez Tech Solutions. Sophia had always been the successful one in the family. At 35, she'd built her company from a small startup into a major player in the cloud computing space, with offices in 3 cities and a client roster that included Fortune 500 companies. Where Emma was cautious and analytical, Sophia was bold and visionary. Where Emma preferred stability, Sophia thrived on calculated risks that had paid off spectacularly. The contrast between the sisters had always created tension. Though they maintained a cordial relationship in public, Emma often complained to me about living in Sophia's shadow, about how their parents still brought up Sophia's achievements at family gatherings, about how exhausting it was to constantly be compared to someone who seemed to excel at everything, effortlessly. That evening, while Maria served dessert and Carlos discussed his retirement plans, Emma's phone buzzed repeatedly on the table. She kept glancing at it with poorly concealed excitement, finally excusing herself to take a call that she claimed was urgent work business. She stepped onto the back patio, leaving the rest of us to continue our conversation about Sophia's latest business expansion. She's been getting a lot of urgent work calls lately, I mentioned casually, hoping someone in Emma's family might have insight into what was going on at Northwest Financial that required so much after-hours attention. Carlos frowned. That's strange. Maria talked to Emma's supervisor at the company picnic last month. He mentioned how much he appreciated Emma's reliability, but said their department rarely requires overtime except during audit season, which won't start until fall. Sophia, who had been quiet during most of the dinner conversation, looked up from her coffee with a knowing expression. David, can I ask you something? Does Emma seem different lately? More secretive, maybe? The question caught me off guard. Not because it was unexpected, because it confirmed that Emma's behavior was obvious enough for her sister to notice during a single dinner. A little, I admitted. Work stress, I assumed. The response was non-committal. But her eyes held a wisdom that made me suspect she'd picked up on things I'd been trying to rationalize away. Just remember that you deserve honesty in your marriage, David. Don't let anyone take advantage of your good nature. Before I could ask what she meant, Emma returned from her call, apologizing for the interruption and claiming there was a crisis with a client's quarterly projections. The explanation sounded rehearsed. I noticed Sophia studying her sister with the same analytical expression she probably used in boardroom negotiations. The drive home was quiet, with Emma checking her phone at red lights and seeming distracted by thoughts that clearly weren't about client projections or quarterly reports. When we got home, she immediately went upstairs to shower, claiming she had a headache and wanted to go to bed early. I heard her phone buzzing from the bathroom counter, but when I glanced at it, the screen was face down and protected by a passcode she'd recently added. That night, lying in bed next to my wife, who felt like a stranger, I realized that our marriage was in serious trouble. What I didn't know was just how much worse things were about to get, or how dramatically my life was about to change when Emma's secret finally came to light in the most public and humiliating way possible. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally arrived on a Friday afternoon in early June. I'd left work early to surprise Emma with tickets to a concert she'd mentioned wanting to see months ago. The band was performing at the Crystal Ballroom, downtown, and I thought maybe a fun evening together might help us reconnect and address whatever distance had grown between us. I pulled into our driveway and noticed an unfamiliar silver Honda Civic parked across the street. Our neighborhood was quiet, mostly young professionals who kept to themselves, so new cars usually belonged to visitors. I didn't think much of it as I walked up to our front door, fumbling with my keys, while mentally rehearsing how I'd present the concert tickets. The house was unusually quiet when I stepped inside, but I could hear faint music coming from upstairs. Emma's car was in the garage, so I knew she was home. I climbed the stairs slowly, planning to surprise her in our bedroom, when I heard a man's voice mixed with Emma's laughter. My heart started pounding as I recognized the intimate tone of their conversation. I stopped outside our bedroom door, which was partially closed, and listened. The conversation was clearly not about work or anything remotely professional. Emma was giggling like a schoolgirl, and the male voice was young, confident, and completely comfortable in my house. Through the crack in the door, I could see Emma sitting on our bed, wearing nothing but one of my old college t-shirts, while a young man I didn't recognize sat beside her, his hand resting on her thigh. "David never does anything spontaneous anymore," Emma was saying, her voice carrying a complaint I'd never heard her express directly to me. "It's all routine with him. Same job, same conversations, same everything. God, Tyler, sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating in this boring suburban life." Tyler. The name hit me like a physical blow. Tyler Brooks, the 24-year-old intern who'd started at Northwest Financial Group 3 months earlier. Emma had mentioned him a few times, always in passing, always in the context of work. Someone who brought fresh energy to their department. She'd never mentioned that he brought fresh energy to our bedroom. "You deserve so much better than settling," Tyler responded. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And I could hear the manipulation in his voice, even if Emma couldn't. Someone like you, with your intelligence and beauty, shouldn't be tied down to someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. Emma leaned into him, and I watched my wife of 3 years rest her head on another man's shoulder in the bed we'd shared for our entire marriage. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never gotten married so young. I was only 25 when David and I got married. Barely knew who I was. "It's not too late to figure that out," Tyler said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Emma, I've been thinking about this a lot. About us. I know this situation is complicated, but I can't keep pretending that what we have is just physical. I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air like a death sentence for my marriage. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, fighting the urge to burst into the room and confront them both. Instead, I listened as my wife responded. "To another man's declaration of love? Tyler, you know I care about you too. These past few months have been the happiest I've felt in years. But David and I have history, financial commitments, his family's business connections. It's complicated. What if it didn't have to be?" "Complicated," Tyler pressed. "What if you could just choose what makes you happy instead of what's expected?" Em pulled away to look at him, and even from my limited vantage point, I could see the conflict in her expression. "You're asking me to leave my husband. I'm asking you to choose yourself for once. Choose us." I couldn't listen anymore. I backed away from the door and retreated downstairs, my mind reeling with the reality of what I'd just witnessed. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, or a mistake Emma had made in a moment of weakness. This was a full-blown emotional and physical affair with someone barely out of college, someone who was systematically encouraging my wife to abandon our marriage. I sat in my car in the driveway for nearly an hour, staring at the concert tickets in my hands and trying to process what I'd learned. The couple I'd glimpsed upstairs looked happy together in a way that Emma and I hadn't been in months. Tyler was right about one thing. Emma did seem different with him, more animated, more alive, more like the woman I'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. When I finally went back inside, Tyler's car was gone and Emma was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as if nothing had happened. She was wearing jeans and a sweater now, her hair pulled back in the practical style she favored for cooking. The transformation from the intimate scene I'd witnessed upstairs was jarring. "Hey, you're home early," she said, without looking up from the vegetables she was chopping. "Good day at work?" "Fine," I managed, still holding the concert tickets. Behind my back, the irony wasn't lost on I'd bought tickets to help save our marriage, while my wife was upstairs planning to leave it. "I was thinking we could try that new Italian place this weekend," Emma continued, her tone casual and domestic. "Marcus mentioned it has great reviews." The normalcy of the conversation felt surreal after what I'd just witnessed. Here was my wife, making weekend plans and discussing restaurant recommendations. Hours after telling her lover that she was falling in love with him and considering leaving our marriage. That night, Emma went to bed early again, claiming exhaustion from a busy week. Lay awake beside her, studying her sleeping face and trying to reconcile the woman next to me with the one I'd seen earlier. In sleep, she looked peaceful, almost innocent. There was no sign of the guilt or internal conflict I would have expected from someone living a double life. The next morning brought the conversation that would change everything. Emma came downstairs dressed for work, even though it was Saturday. When I asked Emma about working overtime on the weekend, her reaction was defensive and vague. Eventually, she admitted she was meeting with Tyler to discuss a project she claimed was urgent. On a Saturday? Can't it wait until Monday? I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as I could. She shot back, clearly irritated. David, not everything revolves around your schedule. Some of us have careers that demand commitment and flexibility, but you wouldn't understand that you've never stepped outside the comfort of your little marketing job. Her words hit hard deliberately, so Emma had always known how to use my insecurities against me, especially when it came to ambition or success, areas where she and her sister Sophia seemed to outshine me. In the past, I might have backed off, but not this time. Not after what I'd seen between her and Tyler, and not after hearing her complaints about our marriage. I saw the tactic for what it was, manipulation. Emma, we need to talk, really talk, about us, about where this marriage is headed. She hesitated for a moment, pausing in the middle of organizing her things. I thought she might finally be ready for an honest conversation. But instead, she gave me a look that felt more pity than concern. David, I don't have time for one. Of your relationship talks, we're fine. You overthink everything. But we weren't fine in deep down. We both knew that. As she walked out the door to meet Tyler, I realized our marriage was already over in every way but name. The real question now wasn't if Emma would leave MIT, was when and how she'd find the nerve to make it official. That Saturday afternoon, I walked through Laurelhurst Park, trying to make sense of it all. I thought about the 7 years we'd spent together, the dreams we'd chased, and the life we'd built. I also remembered overhearing a woman recently saying she felt trapped and wondered what could have been. Maybe Tyler was right. Maybe Emma did have a right to choose happiness, even if that meant destroying our marriage in the process. What I didn't expect was how soon it would happen, or how public and humiliating the fallout would be. The moment that shattered everything came at the Northwest Financial Group's annual summer mixer at the upscale Riverside Hotel overlooking the Willamette River. Emma had looked forward to the event for weeks. She'd bought a new dress, had her hair done professionally, and kept stressing how crucial the night was for her career. She insisted I attend, even though I'd grown tired of playing the role of her supportive husband. The ballroom was filled with her coworkers, clients, and other finance professionals from around Portland. I recognized some from previous events: her supervisor Janet Morrison and a few managing partners. Everyone was dressed sharply, mingling over cocktails while a jazz band played in the background. Emma looked stunning in her emerald green dress, full of energy as she moved through the crowd. For the first hour, we stayed close, with her introducing me as her husband while she engaged in work talk about markets and projections. On the surface, we looked like the perfect couple. Then Tyler Brooks arrived. He was fashionably late, wearing an expensive navy suit that seemed too pricey for an intern. His eyes scanned the room until they found Emmeline. I noticed her demeanor change instantly. Her smile grew more genuine, her body language more animated. He walked straight toward her, bypassing everyone else. "Emma, you look absolutely amazing tonight," Tyler said, eyes locked on hers. "Tyler, I'm so glad you made it," she replied, her tone noticeably warmer than before. "David, you remember Tyler Brooks from the office?" I offered a handshake, studying the man I now suspected of sleeping with my wife. Up close, Tyler was everything I wasn't: tall, fit, and exuding the kind of casual confidence that comes from never having truly struggled. His handshake was strong, his smile polished, and his eyes held a smug awareness of the damage he was causing. "David, great to see you again," he said, though we'd never met. "Emma talks about you all the time." It was a smooth lie, delivered easily. I recognized him for what he was: someone who saw lying not as a flaw, but as a tool. "Sure she does," I said calmly, refusing to react. Then Emma excused herself to the restroom, leaving Tyler and me alone at the bar. I expected awkward silence. Instead, he leaned in and spoke quietly. "You know, Emma's shared a lot about your marriage, how unfulfilled she feels, how she started to wonder if she settled too early. His tone was casual, like we were discussing weekend plans, but every word was meant to hit a nerve. She deserves someone who matches her drive, don't you think? I stared at him, stunned by how bold he was. This 24-year-old intern was confidently telling me I wasn't good enough for my own wife. It's between Emma and me, I replied. Is it though? He said smoothly. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's already made her choice. Before I could respond, Emma returned and subtly stepped between us, not to de-escalate, but to protect him. The three of us stood there in an awkward triangle, while the rest of the room chatted on, unaware of the private disaster unfolding. Tyler was just telling me about his onboarding strategy ideas, she said brightly, though it was clear they hadn't been talking about work. He's so innovative. The firm's lucky to have him. The praise was over the top and clearly inappropriate. I caught Janet Morrison watching from a few feet away, raising an eyebrow. Emma's behavior could no longer be written off as workplace friendliness. I'm going to get some air, I said abruptly, needing space. She barely reacted, already deep in conversation with Tyler Close, smiling, too intimate for public comfort. I stepped out onto the terrace where a few other guests were enjoying the river view. The cool night air helped me breathe. But it couldn't erase what I'd just witnessed. Emma glowing in Tyler's presence in a way I'd never seen before, not even in our happiest days. About 20 minutes later, Marcus Williams, my best friend since college, found me standing outside, still trying to make sense of how quickly everything had unraveled. Marcus worked in commercial real estate and knew several people at the mixer through business connections. His expression was concerned as he approached. David, man, we need to talk, Marcus said quietly, glancing back toward the ballroom. Don't know if you've noticed, but Emma and that young guy are causing quite a stir in there. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? They're practically attached at the hip. Dancing, laughing, sharing drinks. Her supervisor looks mortified, and people are definitely talking. Marcus paused, studying my face. Dude, please tell me you know what's going on here. I couldn't bring myself to admit the full extent of what I knew, so I simply asked, how bad is it? Bad enough that Janet Morrison just pulled Emma aside for what looked like a very serious conversation. The young guy doesn't seem to care. Who's watching? He's acting like... Marcus struggled for the right words. Like he's her boyfriend instead of her husband, I finished. Marcus nodded grimly. I'm sorry, man. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but as your friend, I couldn't just watch this happen. We returned to the ballroom to find Emma and Tyler slow dancing to a song that was far too intimate for a professional networking event. Emma's head was resting on Tyler's shoulder, her eyes closed, completely lost in the moment. They looked like lovers, not colleagues, and the whispered conversations around the room made it clear that everyone had noticed. Janet Morrison approached me while Emma and Tyler continued their inappropriate display. David, I'm sorry you're witnessing this. I've already spoken to Emma about maintaining professional boundaries, but she seems not quite herself tonight. The understatement. It was almost comical. Emma wasn't just unprofessional. She was publicly humiliating both of us while announcing her affair to everyone who mattered in her career. It was career suicide disguised as a romantic declaration. When the song ended, Emma and Tyler remained close together, their faces inches apart. Tyler whispered something that made Emma laugh, and then, in full view of her colleagues, clients, and husband, Tyler leaned down and kissed her softly on the lips. The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to mouths. The jazz quartet seemed to sense the tension and transitioned to a more subdued melody. Emma and Tyler, however, appeared oblivious to the shockwaves they'd created. I watched my wife kiss another man at her company's professional event, surrounded by people who would remember this moment for years to come. The betrayal was complete and public, performed with such casual disregard for consequences that I realized Emma had moved far beyond the point of caring about our marriage, or career, or social conventions. Janet Morrison looked mortified. Several of Emma's colleagues exchanged uncomfortable glances. The managing partners of the firm huddled together in what appeared to be damage control discussions. In one impulsive moment, Emma had potentially destroyed both her professional reputation and our marriage simultaneously. But as I stood there watching the aftermath of Emma's public declaration, something unexpected happened. Crushing devastation I'd anticipated, I felt a strange sense of relief. The uncertainty was over. The pretending was finished. Emma had made her choice clearly and publicly, removing any ambiguity about where our marriage stood. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The morning after Emma's public display at the company mixer, I woke up alone in our bed to the sound of frantic phone calls coming from downstairs. Emma's voice carried through the house, alternating between defensive explanations and panicked apologies. I could hear fragments of conversations with what sounded like her supervisor, then her parents, then various colleagues who had witnessed the previous evening's spectacle. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Emma was pacing frantically, while typing furiously on her laptop, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red from crying, her carefully styled hair now disheveled and wild. "David, thank God you're awake. We need to do damage control. People are talking, and Janet says there might be an HR investigation. I need you to help me explain that what everyone saw wasn't what they think it was." The audacity of her request left me speechless for a moment. Emma wanted me to help cover up her very public affair, to lie to her colleagues and superiors too. Protect the career she'd just sabotaged for a 24-year-old intern. What exactly would you like me to tell them, Emma? That my wife kissing another man in front of her entire company was just friendly workplace interaction? Emma's face crumpled, and she sank into one of our kitchen chairs. It was a mistake. "David, I got caught up in the moment, had too much wine, made a terrible error in judgment. Tyler means nothing to me. You have to believe that." But I'd heard her conversation with Tyler in our bedroom weeks earlier. I'd watched them together at the mixer, seen the genuine intimacy and connection between them. Emma's current desperation wasn't about protecting our marriage, it was about protecting her career from the consequences of her choices. "Where's Tyler now?" I asked calmly. Emma's hesitation was telling. He went home. We haven't spoken since last night." The lie was transparent, especially since Tyler's car was parked in the same spot across the street where I'd seen it yesterday. Emma might be panicking about her professional reputation, but she hadn't ended whatever was happening with Tyler. Over the next several hours, Emma's desperation intensified as the reality of her situation became clear. Janet Morrison called to inform Emma that she was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into her conduct at the mixer. Several clients had contacted the firm expressing concerns about the professionalism of their account management. The managing partners were considering whether Emma's behavior reflected poorly enough on the company to warrant termination. Emma cycled through every emotional manipulation technique she'd ever used during our relationship. First came the tears and self-flagellation, with Emma claiming she was disgusted with herself and couldn't believe she'd made such a terrible mistake. When that failed to generate the sympathy she expected, she shifted to anger, accusing me of being unsupportive during her career crisis. A real husband would stand by his wife when she's facing professional destruction? Emma snapped during one of her more volatile moments. "But you're just sitting there watching me suffer, probably enjoying seeing me brought down?" When anger didn't work, Emma tried bargaining. She promised to cut all contact with Tyler, to attend marriage counseling, to do whatever it took to repair our relationship. She painted elaborate pictures of how we could move forward together, stronger than before, having learned from this experience. "We could even move away from Portland," Emma suggested desperately. "Start fresh somewhere new, away from all these people and their judgments. Wouldn't that be romantic? Just you and me, rebuilding everything together?" But her promises rang hollow because Tyler's car remained parked across the street, and Emma's phone continued buzzing with messages she didn't want me to see. Every few hours, she'd excuse herself to take private calls or respond to texts, always returning with red eyes and renewed anxiety. The breaking point came on Wednesday evening when Emma made one final desperate play for my sympathy and support. She'd spent the day crafting a resignation letter from Northwest Financial, deciding to quit before they could fire her. She presented this as a grand romantic gesture, a sacrifice she was making for our marriage. "I'm giving up my career for us, David, for you. Doesn't that prove how much our marriage means to me?" Emma's resignation letter was beautifully written, filled with regret and dignity, positioning her departure as a mature response to an unfortunate misunderstanding. She'd managed to avoid any direct admission of wrongdoing while suggesting that office gossip and misinterpretation had created an untenable work environment. "I need you to deliver this to Janet tomorrow," Emma said, handing me the sealed envelope. "As my husband. Show them that we're united, that we're handling this together as a team." I stared at the resignation letter, realizing that Emma still believed I would participate in managing the fallout from her affair. She genuinely expected me to walk into her former workplace and present myself as the supportive spouse helping his wife navigate a difficult career transition. "Emma, I'm not delivering your resignation letter." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" "David, I need you to do this. It has to come from you to show that we're presenting a united front." "We're not united, Emma. We haven't been united in months." Emma's composure finally cracked completely. She collapsed onto our living room couch, sobbing with the kind of raw desperation that comes from having exhausted all other options. "Please don't abandon me now, David. I know I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I can't lose everything. I can't lose my career and my marriage and my entire life in Portland." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. I'm ahead indeed. Lost almost everything through her own choices, and the consequences were severe. But her tears weren't for our marriage or for the pain she'd caused me. They were for the comfortable life she'd taken for granted while pursuing excitement with someone else. "You should have thought about that before you decided Tyler was more important than our marriage," I said quietly. Emma looked up sharply. "How long have you known?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with the weight of months of deception and lies. "Long enough to realize that this isn't a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. This is who you've chosen to be." Emma's last desperate gambit came at midnight, when she climbed into bed beside me and attempted physical intimacy for the first time in months. Her approach was calculated and manipulative, designed to remind me of our early relationship and reestablish the emotional connection she'd been systematically destroying. "Remember how good we used to be together?" Emma whispered, her hands exploring with a desperation that felt clinical rather than passionate. "We can have that again, David. We can be happy again." But her touch felt foreign after months of distance. I could smell Tyler's cologne still lingering in her hair. From whatever encounter had preceded this final attempt at salvaging our marriage, Emma's physical desperation was the last card. She had to play, and even she seemed to realize how hollow it felt. I gently removed her hands and moved away from her on the bed. "It's over, Emma. We both know it's over." Emma's sobs filled our bedroom as the reality of her situation finally became undeniable. Her career was destroyed, her marriage was ending, and Tyler Brooks was just a 24-year-old intern who had never promised her anything beyond temporary excitement. The next morning, Emma was gone when I woke up, along with several suitcases and most of her personal belongings. She left the resignation letter on the kitchen counter, along with a note that simply read, "I'll be staying with my parents while I figure things out. I'm sorry for everything." But Emma's departure wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the most surprising chapter of my life, one that would involve her sister Sophia in ways I never could have imagined. 3 days after Emma moved out, I received an unexpected text message from Sophia Rodriguez. "David, I heard about what happened. Would you like to grab coffee and talk? I'm in town for the week." I hadn't spoken to Sophia since that family dinner months earlier, when she'd warned me about deserving honesty in my marriage. Her intuition about Emma's behavior had been remarkably accurate, and I found myself curious about what insights she might offer now that everything had fallen apart. We met at a quiet cafe in the Pearl District, away from anywhere I might encounter Emma's friends or former colleagues. Sophia arrived looking polished and professional as always, wearing a tailored business suit that spoke to her success without being flashy. But when she sat down across from me, her expression was gentler than I'd ever seen it. "I'm sorry about Emma," Sophia said directly, skipping small talk entirely. I knew something was wrong, but I hoped I was mistaken about how far things had gone. "You saw this coming before I did," I admitted, stirring my coffee absently. "When we were kids, she'd start fights with our parents whenever she wanted attention or excitement." Sophia paused, studying my face carefully. "But that doesn't excuse what she did to you, David. You deserved so much better than the way she treated your marriage." Over the next hour, Sophia shared perspectives about Emma that helped me understand patterns I'd missed during our relationship. Emma's tendency to create drama when life became routine, her need for constant validation from new sources, her inability to appreciate stability until she'd destroyed it. Sophia spoke with the analytical clarity of someone who'd observed these patterns for decades. "The ironic thing is that Emma always resented my success," Sophia continued. "But she never understood that success comes from commitment and follow-through, not from chasing whatever seems exciting in the moment." As we talked, I found myself genuinely enjoying Sophia's company in a way I hadn't experienced in months. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and surprisingly easy to talk to. Unlike the competitive dynamic I'd always assumed existed between us, Sophia treated me as an equal, someone whose thoughts and feelings mattered. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sophia said as we finished our coffee. "Are you relieved that it's over, or are you genuinely heartbroken?" The question caught me off guard with its directness, but I found myself answering honestly. Relieved. I've been grieving the end of our marriage for months without realizing it. The Emma I fell in love with disappeared a long time ago. Sophia nodded knowingly. "That's healthy, David. It means you're ready to move forward instead of staying stuck in something that wasn't working." Our coffee meeting led to dinner 2 days later, then a weekend hiking trip to Mount Hood, then regular conversations that gradually shifted from discussing Emma to exploring our own connection. I discovered that Sophia and I shared interests and values that Emma had never appreciated. Sophia respected ambition, but also understood the importance of balance. She valued loyalty and honesty as fundamental relationship requirements rather than optional conveniences. Left, Sophia and I were planning a future together. The transition felt natural and right in a way that surprised both of us. We'd known each other peripherally for years, but we'd never really seen each other clearly until Emma's behavior forced us into honest conversation. "I never thought I'd fall in love with my sister's ex-husband," Sophia admitted during one of our evening walks along the Willamette River. "But I also never expected to meet someone who understands both ambition and integrity." "I never thought I'd be grateful for my wife's affair," I replied. "But Emma leaving led me to discover what I actually want in a partnership." Our relationship announcement sent shockwaves through both families and Emma's social circle. Emma's parents were initially horrified, viewing our connection as a betrayal of family loyalty. Emma herself was furious, alternating between accusations that Sophia had stolen me and claims that I was using her sister to get revenge. The confrontation I'd been expecting came when Emma showed up at my apartment 3 months later, visibly distraught and demanding explanations. Tyler had apparently moved on to pursue someone else, leaving Emma to face the full consequences of her choices alone. "You're with Sophia to hurt me," Emma accused, tears streaming down her face. "This is your way of punishing me for making mistakes." "Emma, this has nothing to do with you," I replied calmly. "Sophia and I connected because we're compatible, not because we wanted to cause you pain, but she's my sister. How could you both betray me like this?" The word betray was almost laughable coming from Emma, but I could see genuine anguish in her expression. She'd lost her career, her marriage, Tyler's attention, and now felt abandoned by her own sister. "We're not betraying you, Emma. We're building something honest and healthy, something based on mutual respect instead of deception." Emma's attempts to sabotage our relationship only strengthened Sophia's resolve. I spent 35 years watching Emma make impulsive decisions and expecting everyone else to manage the consequences. Sophia told me after one of Emma's particularly dramatic interventions. I'm not sacrificing my happiness to protect her. From facing reality, a year later, Sophia and I were married in a small ceremony overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. Emma chose not to attend, though her parents eventually came to accept and even celebrate our union. They'd watched both daughters for decades and recognized that Sophia and I brought out the best in each other in ways that Emma and I never had. Our marriage has been everything. My relationship with Emma wasn't built on genuine partnership, honest communication, and shared respect for each other's dreams and boundaries. Sophia challenges me professionally while supporting me emotionally. We've created a life together that feels both exciting and stable, passionate and secure. Emma eventually found work with a smaller financial firm in Seattle, starting over. In a new city where her reputation from Portland couldn't follow her, I heard through mutual friends that she'd learned valuable lessons about the cost of impulsive choices and was working to rebuild her life more thoughtfully. Tyler Brooks lasted 6 months at Northwest Financial before being quietly let go for inappropriate workplace behavior with another colleague. Some people never learn from their mistakes, while others use their failures as opportunities for genuine growth. As I write this, Sophia and I are celebrating our second wedding anniversary and expecting our first child. We've built a partnership based on everything Emma and I lack: trust, mutual support, and the kind of deep respect that makes love sustainable rather than just exciting. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you opens the door to the best thing that could happen to you. Emma's betrayal freed me to discover what I actually deserved in love, and introduced me to the woman who would become my true partner in life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out.